When we talk about trademark, it's got to be owned by the players. They've got to live, breathe and believe in it.
Alex Pearce, what makes him the captain of this club?
He's so inspirational with how he trains, and then he backs it up by, he won't always have something to say, but when he does have something to say, he's usually spot on.
So what do you do day by day here to set up the strengths of the leaders within this organisation?
Just encouraging all of the players who, if they see something, to feel comfortable knowing how to verbalise it first and foremost so it has impact, but then also receiving the information. It can be tough at times.
Well, Damian Martin is a legend of WA basketball, 6-time champion with the Perth Wildcats, but he's changed colours from red to purple as the leadership advisor for the Fremantle Dockers. I'm pleased to say we're in the Fremantle studios today with Damian Martin as a Docker himself. Welcome to the Dribble podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
So, leadership advisor, what is it? Why this job?
Yeah, it's something that came about over probably 6 months of meeting with Joe Bridie, and then I met with Justin Longmuir, and then eventually Alex Pearce and a few of the other people that have influence within the club. And to be able to come in and just try and influence the leadership group, or a lot of the core players that have been here a while and are seen as their leaders, just to try and find those 1 or 2% improvements across the board. And I just think that essentially leadership, is the ability to have influence on someone else, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Some lead by example, some lead by communication. If you can combine the two, you can usually do something special if you bring others along for the journey. And I think there's a plethora of talent within this playing group, and I'm fortunate enough to work predominantly not just with the leadership group, but those who do have that type of influence in a positive way I mentioned before.
So you don't have a footy background in any way,
No.
Being a New South Welshman. How different is it walking into a football club, having spent your life playing a little bit of rugby and then a lot of basketball?
I had to have a little giggle on day one because I can't really remember the last time I was nervous about something I was going to do. I'm quite comfortable in the jobs I've been a part of, since playing with the Wildcats. And on day one, the boys were simply just warming up, doing their running, and someone called for a kick, and I thought, anything could happen. And sure enough, I sprayed it. And then I was a little tentative about the next few, but it's great to be in an environment where you've got so many like-minded people trying to achieve a similar goal, or the same goal. But yeah, I'm not going to lie, the lack of background in kicking a footy has been on display multiple times.
Just the size of things as well. Like, I came out there today that there were 12 people like yourself in blue as assistant coaches or some sort of role within training, and there's 40 odd players out there. That's so much bigger than anything you would have experienced from a basketball perspective. They don't even have 12 blokes sitting in a team at some points.
Yeah, you're spot on. When I was fortunate enough to be captain of the Wildcats, you sit in player-only meetings and maybe there's 15 in total there. Instead, you get up to address the playing group and you've got 44 odd players, plus the amount of assistant coaches, senior coach, and then just the support staff behind the scenes, dietitians, physiotherapists, doctors. It's incredible the amount of people involved in this footy club out there to try and help the playing group win a flag.
Every time I've seen you, I've laughed because you've seemed to have buddied up with the tallest person here, Sam Naismith, who's 206 centimetres.
Yeah.
You seem to be hanging out with him because you used to hang out with tall people, aren't you?
And maybe subconsciously that's where I'm most comfortable, is just hanging out with the guys who are 6'7" and taller. So yeah, Sammy's been a great pick up by the club and getting to pick his brain about life at other footy clubs when he was a player in the ruck. But even Sean Darcy I've become quite close with, love picking his brain and being alongside him. Luke Jackson, former basketball player. So yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but maybe there is a common theme.
There are 6 courts just out there here at Coburn. Has Luke Jackson ever said to you, hey, let's have a crack, let's go one-on-one?
We did go over to the Waste and do some workouts there, and I was grinning from ear to ear because O'Driscoll, Draper, there's some handy basketball players and supporters of the Wildcats, and Sammy Switkowski, probably one of the smaller guys on the team, he loves his basketball, and I thought I couldn't help myself, so I played a bit of defense on him, and I'm lucky that his ball connected with another ball in the air because I actually think he was about to cross me up and hit a 3. So a reminder that I'm old, grey hair and slowed now, because it's good to be back on a basketball court, but even the footballers were showing me up.
We might be old, grey-haired and slow, but today, just out there, you at 185 centimetres?
About 186. I'll take the extra one.
You were opposed during some drills to Aidan Riddle, who's giving up 13 centimetres, and you spoiled him really, really well. You were smart enough to get off Pat Voss, who looked like he was an angry man at the time as well. This isn't just something where you're sitting in rooms chatting to people. You're out on the track getting involved in drills and putting yourself out there?
It's one of the biggest surprises I've had since taking on this role is the amount you are out on the track and you're actually getting in there and playing some defense or being a facilitator, whatever that role might be within that drill. And I'm loving it, getting back in amongst it from an exercise point of view, but more importantly, from the competitive nature side of it. I love nothing more than when I am down back playing defense on some of these guys that I idolized watching from the sidelines last season and doing my best to try and make it tough for them. The reality is I think they take it easy on me when I am the coach that is playing on them at that time. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Did you ping a hammy? Or almost ping a hammy? Not today. A couple of weeks back, you pulled up really short chasing Caleb Sarong.
I thought I got away with it, and I actually went back, and about an hour later I had a text message from Paul Haysby, who I used to do radio with, and he goes, "Rumour has it you've done your hemi." I'm like, how does he know? So someone who was watching training did get back to Hayes. I was trying to get away with it because I was not trying to be that guy that comes into training and pings a hemi as a coach. But yeah, I pretty much couldn't run for about the next 7 to 10 days.
So having played at such a long career, such an amazing level, and now you've seen how people defend in AFL and the way it's all set up, is defence something that can be transferred between? Like at your peak, could you have played as a tagger in football, as a back pocket in football, with your knowledge and eyes and ability to intercept things? Could that defensive player that you were play in a football environment or any other sports now that you've seen this?
In a way, maybe how you read the flight of the ball. So from a rebounding perspective, you read the flight of that shot and you're trying to get the right angles to around a box out. Probably the bigger guys would be really good and instrumental in coming in and showing with their footwork, how they use their footwork. Someone like a Matty Knight, he was undersized at times. He's 6'8", but he was guarding guys who were potentially 6'11" or taller. But his footwork, being able to use his core strength, his hips, his legs, and his mobility, yeah, I've taken away some of the things I learned from Matty Nielsen and Sean Redditch, Nick Cade, the great, big man of Australia, to try and use that to help in some small way when I am coming up against these bigger opponents. So I think that's probably where you have a lot of crossover between basketball and football. But to answer your question, no, I think I might be a bit too small to be a key defender like someone like, the way that Moose moves out there. Alex Pearce is brilliant, but he's doing it at, 6'5", 6'6". I'm much shorter than he is, but the athleticism of him and the way he spoils the ball and reads it is incredible.
What we also find incredible is ball skills translate. Like, this is an oval ball versus a round ball. You bounce the Aussie rules footy with both hands better than some players do. Like, most players just bounce with their dominant hand. You're walking around the ground just bouncing at both hands, kicking at both feet to yourself. Like, not many AFL players walk around doing that sort of stuff.
Well, I still have Bryce Cotton in my head whenever I'm doing something new, because his big advice that he got taught when he was a junior, and I pass on now to junior basketball, is whatever you do with your left hand, you've got to be able to do with your right, within reason. So yeah, I didn't realise I was actually doing it, but it's kind of a little test I have for myself when I get here, is to get a football as early as possible when I get to the club, just so I can try and improve my skills, even though I'm far from ever being an AFL footballer. But part of my role within the club is to get out there and try and make it easy for the guys when I do return the ball. So
Trevor Gleeson, before coaching the Wildcats, in between the Tigers and the Wildcats, went and worked for Hawthorn and went and worked for North Melbourne as a skills coach, working on as much ball use as possible. Jenny Screen's been working at the Hawthorn Footy Club, and Alistair Clarkson, as we were talking about before, went to the Golden State Warriors during his year off between Hawthorn and North Melbourne. So this isn't something that's new, basketball and football coming together. Is there a reason why you think it works?
Yeah, I think a lot of the similarities between, the hand-eye coordination, running, jumping, the ability to be able to use your left and right hand, the peripheral vision that's important in both codes. So the touch with using your fingertips and not wanting it to clunk onto your palm. In basketball, you only use your fingertips. Football, obviously, it's going to touch your palm a few times. But yeah, there are a lot of crossovers. And I hit up Trev when I, was weighing up whether to take the job or not. And he loved his time at North Melbourne and at Hawthorn. And he gave me some advice of things to look out for and how he believes he made some improvements with those footy clubs, and he was instrumental in me not only making the decision but trying to bring different things to the club.
We know how good you were as a leader, and trademark was such a big moment with the Wildcats. It was all about Wildcats basketball. What is it around trademarks that you can establish with a group like this to help them be successful?
Well, I mentioned Trevor Gleeson. Prior to Trevor was, Rob Beveridge was my coach at the Wildcats initially, and he was huge on the belief that it's player-driven, coach-supported, club-facilitated, and I believe in that as well. So when we talk about trademark, it's got to be owned by the players. They've got to live, breathe, and believe in it. So when I meet with the leadership group or the collective group as a whole, then it's got to be something they want to do, not something that's forced upon them. So trademark was huge for the Wildcats, absolutely. A lot of who we were our identity was the unspoken stuff. It was doing all the extras, all those cliche 1%ers before or after training. And that wasn't something we sat down and spoke about. It was led by Sean Redditch initially. And because he was a boomer, one of the best players in the league, I wanted to follow whatever he was doing outside of the required team training. And then before you knew it, Jesse Wagstaff has always been the ultimate pro. Greg High, all these other guys started doing it. And before you knew it, it wasn't just Sean anymore. It was 7 or 8 and then 9 or 10. And before you knew it, that was probably the culture of the club, was those unspoken things that everyone just went about.
So what do you do day by day here to set up that sort of trademark, or set up the strengths of the leaders within this organisation?
Just encouraging all of the players, if they see something, that if it's worth verbalising because it's for the betterment of the team, to feel comfortable knowing how to verbalise it first and foremost so it has impact, but then also receiving the information. It can be tough at times. Everyone's competitive. It's a physical sport. In the moment, you may not deliver it in the most perfect, articulate way, but if the person receives it, takes it on board and becomes a better footballer for it, then I see that as a win. And there's a lot of really good leaders on this footy club who aren't in the leadership group but have a massive amount of influence on the success this club will have. So
they've just announced their leadership group. Is it different, the process you just went through, compared to what you would have gone through your basketball career?
No, I love that it's player driven. Coaches do have a vote, but when there's 44 odd players having their say, that far outweighs the opinions of the coaches, and there's strong alignment between coaching staff and the playing group. So I don't think there was any real surprises. I think Josh Treacy is the new addition to the leadership group from last season to this, and he has stood up. I can't compare him to who he was last season because I wasn't around the footy club, but he's most definitely been one of the players who have stood up and impressed, in my opinion, and I thought it was a no-brainer he'd get voted in.
So it's fascinating when a new set of eyes comes in. Like I said, you weren't a footy person, but you've spotted a guy who the fans loved last year. I know this is a basketball podcast. Some people listening to this won't know who Josh Treacy is, but he's known as the big kahuna, and he hurts people and he kicks goals. He's a big bugger, and the fans really enjoy him. What did you embrace about him?
His competitive nature. He just wants nothing but good things for this footy club, and he wants to make sure he's not the reason something bad is to happen or was to happen to the club, whether it's in games, whether it's within moments, whether it's outside of a game and it's at training. He just gives his all to this club, doesn't take any shortcuts whatsoever, lives and breathes the trademark, lives and breathes the culture, and he verbalises it in his own way. He comes out and he's such a competitive beast that he demands such high standards, and he'll hold others accountable to it, but he's very tough on himself also.
And big moves, you mentioned that the captain, Alex Pearce, key defender, played cricket as well, just a good athlete in every single way. What makes him a good leader? What makes him the captain of this club?
Initially, what stood out in the early days, pre-season is so long, was he led by example. You come back for those the pre-season running and the conditioning sessions, and those time trials just look horrible. I'm glad we didn't have those with the Wildcats. And, Alex was coming back from a serious injury at the back end of last season. His off-season, hasn't been smooth sailing, but he's still been the ultimate pro in finding ways to stay fit. And for him to, I think, win the last time trial, everybody's knackered. I think he was top 5 in the first 2, wins the last one. And then we go and train and he's, jumping over the back, trying to spoil. He's so inspirational with how he trains, and then he backs it up by, he won't always have something to say, but when he does have something to say, he's usually spot on. So he's a pretty easy guy to follow.
Jesse Wagstaff's a pretty ezy guy to follow too, isn't he? Like, do you see similarities? Like, when Jesse talks, everybody listens. He just does everything right.
Smart, high IQs within their own right, both on and off the field. Thoughtful, process-driven, and you're spot on. They don't waste words. I've got a fear of silence, so I wouldn't shut up when I was captain. Jesse's more thoughtful when it's time to speak up. He's got something to say. He's pretty much never wrong.
Can you believe Jesse hit 500? That's a nuts figure, isn't it?
Do I believe it? Yes. But it's amazing that it's come about. It's a reminder of, how long he's been at the Wildcats, how fortunate I was to call him a teammate all those years. But I remember on day one, we lived together in Scarborough. The Wildcats put us up for a short-term accommodation until we found our own rentals. And initially it was supposed to be 2 weeks together. And in the end, I think we spent the first 6 weeks together. We were in no rush. We were enjoying, I think it was sausages on bread with onion, tomato sauce every single dinner that we'd cook on the barbecue. And every single day I've known him from then until now, he just always makes sure he gets the best out of his body, but he's also doing right by it with recovery, with nutrition, with sleep. He's just incredible with his routine. And it doesn't matter if they've had a win or a loss, nothing changes. Doesn't matter if he's gone 0 from 10 from the field or dropped 4 threes to win in the game in the fourth quarter. Process doesn't change, and I think guys are drawn to that.
When you retired, you would have thought he'd be a year or two behind you in joining on the sidelines. He just keeps on going. Feels like he's going to go next year as well.
Look, I honestly believe he's still one of the most important players on that roster. If he could play 25 minutes a game, I think they would win more games because he knows how to get the best out of his teammates, in particular Bryce Cotton. That chemistry those two have. He just knows when to set a drag screen in transition, when to set a pin down, when to slip for an easy one, when to pick and pop. He's just a smart basketball player that, yes, he may not get nearly as many dunks as he did once upon a time. He's slowing down just a little bit, but I see him as one of the most important players on this Wildcats roster. And if they go on to do something special in the postseason, I dare say Jesse's had a big influence on that. Will he go around again? I have no idea. I did. I bought a bottle of scotch for him about 3 seasons ago because that's what he got me when I retired. And I don't mind admitting I've ended up drinking it myself because I'm like, I don't know when he's going to retire. Let's not have this thing go to waste. And I'll have to go out and get him a present at some stage. But when that is, I actually have no idea.
He and Bryce have an amazing relationship on the court, and we know what Bryce is capable of during the finals. He's 1 game away from heading into those, or at least at minimum, it'll be a play-in tournament, maximum all the way through the GF. Like, what do you see about Bryce that has changed over the years, the moment playoffs begin?
Look, he's always been ultra competitive, and that doesn't matter whether it was a preseason game, regular season, or postseason. But he also knows that the stakes are higher. So I think he's very, very patient. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I dare say in just about every big game he's had where he's dropped 35 plus, rarely does he have double digits after the first quarter. He finds his way into the game. He gets others involved early in the game so that they feel confident and ready to go. And then he picks his moments to take over. In finals, he's probably that little bit more assertive as trying to get ball in hand maybe that little bit earlier. But apart from potentially that, not much else changes. He trains hard every single day. He was probably the only player that was allowed to train with the heart rate monitor in the red. Most guys, as soon as they get in the red, hey, you need 5 minutes on the sideline because you're potentially going to get injured. Whereas because Bryce plays, trains, lives that way, he's totally fine. And he's so fit, he's ready to go, and mindset-wise, there's always a target on his back. That doesn't change just because it's finals. So, yeah, he'll be good to go. And I loved running out the tunnels with him during finals because you just knew he believed we were going to win, and that was contagious.
You sit courtside commentating the games. Do you marvel at how different he becomes every year? Just a little tweak here, a little tweak there. Here's another move. This is something different. He finds ways in the off-season to just become even better all the time.
Well, he's a student of the game. The fact that he grew up in the US, wanting to be an NBA player, had to overcome so much adversity, got told time and time again you wouldn't be good enough because you're too small. He just proved so many people wrong. And then he comes to Australia, a nation he never visited before, to play for a team he'd never heard of, and he started researching it. He could tell you the numbers that Leonard Copeland had, that Andrew Gazers had, that Ricky Grace had. He just wants to go back throughout the history of the game and learn from different players and different people who've had influence within that league. And so every off-season, you say individuals are made in the off-season, teams during the pre-season. Doesn't matter how many MVPs he's had, he still believes he can continue to get better. And I did not think at his age, and all that he's done in this league, last week I interviewed him pre-game and I said, is this the best basketball you've ever played? And his answer was yes. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
We just got to hope he stays in the country. And doesn't end up
Absolutely,
in Japan or something like that where there's a lot of money. How do you see the Wildcats? Like, they're in a really weird position at the moment. They've played some great basketball and they let themselves slip a little bit, and now they're maybe third, hopefully second if things go their way. Like, where do you see them going from here?
The league in general is so tight. A couple of rounds ago, they win both those games. They sit in second, they drop to fifth. And all of a sudden, they bounce back with back-to-back wins over the most previous weekend. Where do they sit? If they can get consistent stops at the defensive end, I don't think there's any team that can stop them on a regular basis from scoring 100 points. But if they're going to let the other team run and gun and get offensive rebounds, get kickouts for threes, then the league is too talented to simply rely on being able to score at one end. And I thought against the Sydney Kings over the weekend, they played some really good defense at times. And instead of doing one or two possessions where they really can get in a stance and play defense, they're not a bad team defensively, but instead of seeing it for 2 or 3 possessions, can they put together 2 or 3 minutes? Can they put together 5 minutes? Can they build an 8-point lead and then all of a sudden they're going to put their foot on the opposition's throat and build that to 12 or 14 and try and break them mentally? Because every team comes in and going, we're playing against Bryce Cotton. It should be we're playing against the Perth Wildcats, and win or lose, we're going to be feeling this when we get back on the plane tomorrow. And I think the other guys on that roster alongside BC deserve that respect. Christian Doolittle, what he's been doing of late has been incredible. I'm a big fan of Dylan Wendler. I think Benny Henschel will be in the NBA next season. I could go through that roster. Aquera stepped up at times. KP was amazing over the weekend and is a bona fide star of this league. Hiram Harris, tough as nails. They tick all the boxes. It's just a matter of making sure they can do it at the right time together.
Did you like the change over the weekend where it went back to the big dogs to start, and the big dogs spent big minutes out in the court, especially Friday night? They just KP and Doolittle and Windler and Bryce didn't leave the court in that last quarter.
Yeah, I thought Keanu Pinder was instrumental in that win. I think the first possession he had was on the low block. He could have turned around, faced up and shot a contested shot. Instead, he ripped right, used his athleticism and speed and got on the ring, and that didn't slow down for the full 40 minutes. I thought he was absolutely brilliant, and when he gets out and running and he's in that two-man game with BC, that connection is amazing. Webster's missed a lot of basketball. I love the extended minutes that he got to get back out there on the floor because, you always have a focus to fourth quarter of Game 5 of the grand final. Who are you going to need for help? And Webster is certainly in that mix of players that will see time if they're in that environment.
In the hypothetical world, they win against Adelaide on Friday night, and Melbourne either take care of business on Sunday or don't lose by too much, Wildcats are going to finish third. And that's going to mean that there's no venue for them to play at RAC Arena. Kylie Minogue's going to be spinning around and they're going to be getting out of her way and heading to Challenge Stadium. So you've played at Perth High Performance Centre as it is now. What's the venue like compared to RAC Arena? Is there a difference in how they would feel running out into the court, how the whole system would work for them?
Back when we played at what was then known as Challenge Stadium, it was the best atmosphere in the league. It didn't have the highest amount of numbers because it's a small stadium, but the atmosphere was incredible because it feels like the supporters are sitting on top of you. So the atmosphere won't drop off, even though there's going to be maybe 4,000 people compared to 14,000 people. But anytime you play in a new arena, you do have to, adjust. The court's still the same width and length. The rings could potentially be slightly different, but it's just adjusting to the depth perception of, instead of having this huge arena, you just got to focus in on what's in front of you, and that's a small stadium.
So would they have to train there, do you feel, to get a real idea about how to play it before turning up? Like, are they going to need to get a few sessions in? It'd
be nice to get a few sessions in there. Absolutely. Does it really matter? No. They only train at RAC Arena on game day when they get some shots up. Otherwise, they're out at Bendat Basketball Stadium. So it's not a big deal. It's not like football where it blows my mind that there's different size fields. In basketball, it's always going to be the same width, length, and height of ring. So it's a small thing the players would like to be able to do, but I don't think it determines the outcome. At the end of the day, you're going to have a sold-out basketball stadium full of people wearing red and supporting the team they love.
So your last 2 games as a player were amid massive distraction as COVID kicked in, and you found out 2 or 3 hours before your second last game you were playing in front of nobody, and then your last game was in front of nobody, and it was interstate, and it became... Then the season got cancelled a day or 2 later. Like, how would they handle the knowledge now that it's going to be different? And the players are finding out now that RAC Arena is unavailable and that it'll all be a bit different if they finish third. Like, what would the reaction be internally and how would they handle it?
Internally, the majority of the group, only Jesse, all the guys played their pre-season. No, I think they might have played all the games at RAC, even with the Hoops Fest. Look, if they were to come out and if they were to lose the game and use that as an excuse, their mindset's in the wrong place. Would they like to be playing at RAC Arena? Absolutely, because that's what they know. That's what they've experienced and they've fallen in love with, and is one of the real pleasures with playing with the Wildcats is playing in front of the Red Army at RAC. But for someone like Jesse, he's probably got up and said, guys, Challenge Stadium offers an incredible atmosphere, but the reality is when you're playing elite sport, most of the game, probably 95% of the game, is a blur. It's just a static noise in the distance. In those big moments where you get a massive steal or take a charge or you get a huge dunk and the crowd goes to another level, you hear it in those moments. You want to do whatever it takes to replicate that specific moment. But overall, it shouldn't matter whether there's 4,000 people in the stand or 14,000. The atmosphere is still going to be amazing, and it's not an excuse whether the Wildcats win or lose.
So all that stuff's about today and where you are and where they are. In the future, one last one to finish this. Now that you got back into clubland, is basketball clubland again going to be something for you? Is coaching something that you aspire towards now that you've got back into in footy and seeing what it's like again? Or is it not realistic with the family and the lifestyle you need to live?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I'm loving being back in clubland first and foremost. But with a young family, I've seen the best coaches, people I admire, get fired. There's just no stability in it. And, Trevor Gleeson wins Coach of the Year up in Townsville, goes to Melbourne, he gets fired. So with a young family, I've got no desire at all to do it, just because I think it's too much out of your control. But I love being around it again. But with a sports management company that I love, that's my role in sport now. That's my role in basketball, is being in a fortunate position to be the inner sanctum of some of the athletes that we get to surround ourselves with. Hiram Harris, I love that we get to represent him, David Aquera, a couple of the Wildcats to mention. So no, coaching isn't for me, but do I love being back in the clubland? Yeah, it's an amazing environment.
Well, I think the Fremantle Dockers are very lucky to have you. Those blokes are very lucky to be represented by you. You're always inspirational no matter what you do, whether it's in clubland, or in media, or in management. So I think everyone really just loves seeing you do whatever you are doing at the time. So thanks for giving up so many time today. Really appreciate you coming on the Dribble podcast.
Thanks, God. Thanks, mate.